So everything's available to us. And just like, I use the analogy of colors on the palette, right? Like we don't get our palette ready to paint and put blue, 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 right? We want paint, but we want all different colors. So we come here to express that oneness in a unique frequency that is us, like a color or a song or a vibration or a frequency. And so we're still the paint, like we're still the drop in the ocean, we're still the entire ocean. So instead of being like, I'm just a drop, I can't do it. It's like, no, remember the you that is the ocean and how to access that. And that's for me, like, that's why I paint, right? Is to help, like, okay, I know this, but still feels a little clunky down here on earth on the day-to-day. So I'm going to take it to the canvas and I'm going to paint it and I'm going to focus on it and I'm going to get to know it on an intimate level. And I feel like, and I'm curious about your creations because, and this has come up from other people recently in a way that is bringing it to the forefront of my consciousness again, that I do believe there is something unique that happens, unique and like clearer, stronger energetically when as women, let's just say as women, we go into our creative practice with the intention of connecting to our divine self, to our most authentic self, to the divine feminine, that there's an extra like boost, like, it's like having, really high-speed internet as opposed to dial-up or something, that when you engage in that creative frequency, because that is the feminine, that's shakti, right? That she can come through and co-create with us and through us that much more potently because we're in that same vibration together. So how did you start making your sacred art and talismans? And
I was an artist, as I said, a gallery artist, working in lots of different mediums, and my pieces were getting more and more ephemeral. I was starting to work with doing women's handwork and like stitching, but every stitch was a prayer. I was wanting to make objects, I was connecting into my ancestors and I was wanting to connect with them, which has now become a big part, but this was probably more than a decade ago. I started doing women's handwork and labor to try to, and like knitting with bones and sticks and trying to like understand how my grandmothers did that and kind of finding the cellular memory in my body as I did those things. And I was a terrible knitter, by the way, but I just still was like wanting to converse and do things because I knew I'd given birth, I was cooking, I was growing food, I was wanting to understand what was their life like and where can they intersect with me, because I felt like there was a body of knowledge that was for me to access that was still alive, still in me, but it was unawakened and I wanted to kind of call it forth. But in that process, my gallery dropped me because my pieces got so ephemeral. And then I was like, I'm done with the gallery. And I had a situation in my life that was so devastating. I had a very deep, dark night of the soul. And it wasn't the first, but this one took me out. I cried multiple times a day for about a year and a half. And I was like, I've got to stop this. And so then I started meditating, and I meditated 2 to 6 hours a day to kind of call myself back. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with art. I don't need to make any more objects. I'm just going to meditate. I went to my studio, I meditated, and I started offering meditations to teach people how to inhabit their multidimensionality, how to bilocate, how to remote view, because when I was meditating 2 to 6 hours a day, like when you're in meditation for 6 hours, the veils begin to dissolve. It just becomes a different world. And so that was the start of me just being in communion, like my offering, what's my creative offering through this other side? How can I reach the other side? And in the process of that, making those offerings, those meditations in my studio, is called Coherent Field Project. And they were crazy. Oh my God, it was crazy what would take place in my studio. studios are sacred temples. And it just became more of a temple. And I had my artwork up, but I was just like, everyone just come in, we're just gonna meditate for 4 hours, or meditate for 2 hours, and 2-hour group meditation. And in the process of that, I was given a carte blanche to do an installation, and they were like, what would you like to do? It's a public art installation. And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to make bronze sculptures like Kiki Smith. I was like, I could do anything I want. I have any budget. I was like, oh my God. Blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'm going to learn how to cast in bronze. And I started working with the indigenous people, and I was working with the Chochenyo, the Ohlone people, who are the people of Berkeley, and that was Berkeley, California. And I was starting to collaborate with them, and it became very clear to me that I needed to identify, this is a long answer, what my ancestral relationships were to earth and land through my indigenous relationships, through my ancestral relationships, as I held conversations with these people, because my work was about indigenous animals and language and plants. And so this is all taking place. I'm sitting on the land, listening, sitting on that urban corner, you know, at night, listening, what needs to emerge here? How do I do this? And listening, and forming wax into native animals, snakes and different creatures and lizards, and having a really hard time. It was very hard to make I don't make realistic things. I'm very, you know, inspired. And at one point I was like in tears, and I was like, I said to the wax, I was like, show me what I can make. Like, I can't make this, I can't. And this form of the Gaia came through, and as it always is, it's like, I don't know what it is. And I finish it, and I'm like, it's in wax. And I'm like, well, what is it? And they're like, it's a ceremonial tool. It's a woman's ceremonial knife. And I was like, huh? And they're like, yeah, this is for Gaia, and I had been going through a period of being really disturbed by the appropriation of tools. I'd see someone, they say like, oh, this is from, you know, a Tibetan monastery, or this is from a shaman, or this is a Native American shaman. I was like, you shouldn't have that. Like, wait, where's the white people's tools? Like, where's my ancestors' tools? You should not have that precious item from that shaman or that teacher or that monastery or that temple. You should not have that. That was taken probably or bought at a cheap rate because there was poverty. Like that, those sacred tools should be on their landscape. They should be with the people. Those are heirlooms. You know, those are cultural and family heirlooms. You should not have one. And I was like, oh, when this came through, I was like, Gaia, okay, I'm going to start making tools for Europeans. But I had this, I made one in bronze, and I carried it around in my pocket. I wasn't determined to make a series at that time, but I would show it to people. I'd be like, I want one. And I was like, And then I started making them in multiples, and immediately other forms came through. And I was like, well, who's the overlighting goddess? Brigid came through, and just one by one, a form would come through, and a deity. I'd hear a name, Brigid. I'd be like, well, who's that? And I'd have to go look her up. Freya, who's that? And I'd have to go look her up. Same thing. I would just hear the name. I'd be like, okay. And then I would have to do a deep dive into understanding what it was. So your question was about tapping into. So I have a rule that whenever I'm working on the deity blades, gods and goddesses, that I have to be connected to that deity. I have to be in honor. I have to be in a good space. Like I can't work on these things when I'm angry and pissed and distracted. And then I think about the frequency of that being, that deity, and what they represent, you know, while I'm working on them, and while I'm working on the machinery, and the machinery, all the big machinery that you work to do, metal cleaning up and polishing and grinding, has its own thing. It's got its own field going on. It's got sounds and tones and resonances, and things get very hot, and I work with flames and, you know, blow torches, and so I have to be attuned to that deity while I'm working on the piece. It's just, otherwise I'm not going to do it. It's for that deity. So that's one answer. That's the deity thing. But tapping into the divine feminine, or our own authentic nature as a fractal of divinity, I think is really important. And I think that when you're, you know, each of us are a fractal of this divine manifestation mandala, but we can't really be our glowing bright fractal unless it's truly authentic and truly us. And that's what's needed right now. We need to inhabit our own unique fractal of the mandala in order for the mandala to become whole. So tapping into what's mine to say, and this is something we've lost the skill set to, because we've been programmed to be more alike and more alike and more alike, so that we are forgetting who we really are. We've forgotten, as you talked about that, in this great amnesia of our unique expression. And that is super essential to find out, wait, what is mine to express, on canvas or singing or in the garden or with my food or just the way I dress, what is mine to express? And often a canvas, making art, because it doesn't have a place, nobody's going to eat it, you don't need to make money off of it, it actually can be private, nobody has to see it, is a really great place to experience what is my authentic expression. So you setting the container, you said setting the space for it, is really vital, so vital, to have a space where you can go and explore what is mine, who am I, and what can come through. And sometimes people find that, well, it's not the canvas, but once they've tapped into what that feels like, that kind of tone, you can take it out into other mediums. I mean, maybe right now I'm playing a lot of music. I find I jump from mediums to find, if I get caught up and I can't remember what I'm doing, I switch mediums. So that I can like, oh, here, this one, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna play some music and, forget about all that. And then the divine feminine, tapping into the divine feminine for the work, that's a whole other thing, which is that there's all these faces of the feminine that need to be re-anchored. They need to be anchored again into this reality, because they've been forgotten. They've been forgotten. I just have so many, they're like, please let us come back, because you think that you've got the whole game. Humans have been cut off from this massive resource of support and wisdom, knowledge that's ancient. You can tap into your past lifetimes, your ancestors' lifetimes, all these powerful mystical lineages, all these beings, the angels, the deities, the spirit guides, the starkin, like they're there to help us. So by creating artwork that is speaking or addressing them, or your ancestors, you're creating these sort of fields and pathways to these resources and intelligence and wisdom bodies. So I noticed you had done a series like a Tara painting, like I was like, oh, that's really great. This is a way to tap into the Taras. There's 21 faces. She represents just about every aspect of human consciousness. And so choose a Tara. I don't know how you did it exactly, but I was like, yeah, Tara, that's a great form of divinity to make an offering, open up to, receive, stand in your authentic place and speak and receive, because she's a mom. She's got it all. Like, what's your problem? I've got a mantra, I've got it out. I can facilitate. She's so old, and so,
Yeah.
that's, so those, to me, those are all like 3 different ways, just because that's how,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so tell me about tell me the answer to your own question, answer back to me. Or tell me about the Tara, how the Tara inspiration, do you address the 21 Taras when you do your work? When you hold that workshop, do you?
Yeah. So one thing is that the way I roll is that, like I said, someone, an entity, a divine, Tara, Bridget, Freya, come to me, and I want to get to know them, which I do at the canvas. Like, that's how I get to know them. And then 2, I want to share. So Tara came through because and I had painted a yellow Tara / Lakshmi, very magical painting. And I was talking with the woman who helps me with my business about doing some special, low price point entry offer in September 2020 to lead up to my coaching certification. And I was like, oh, I could add a new lesson to the Buddha painting course, which painting Buddha, that's a whole other story, but I had been around for years and lots of people painted Buddha. gotten to know Buddha as a result. And I'm like, I'll add something new and kind of say, oh, join in September, special new edition Buddha, and do some live, things and all that. And as I'm talking to her, I hear, which for me is I'm claircognizant, so I get the thought, and the thought was paint the feminine Buddha. And I was like, oh, Dawn, I could paint Tara. And then I hear I have 21 aspects. And I'm like, she has 21 aspects. Dang, it's a whole new course. And this is August 2020. This studio was like this board, the wall was just being installed. It was just the OSB, not painted, not caulked, which I did all that. And it's paragliding season. So like if it's flyable, I just want to fly. So August is not when I create entirely new programs, right? But I mean, it was like, it wasn't like, okay, yay, I'll paint Tara. There was lots of resonance, but it was like, right now, really? It was like, okay, I'll do it, right? So I found a book by Rachel Wooten about Tara, which is an amazing book. I'm spacing the name of the book right now. It's probably right over there. But Rachel Wooten, Green Tara, whatever. And she goes through her 21 aspects. And so I'm like, I will share with people, because I'd kind of started down the road of wanting to learn her aspects years before, and it kind of stopped. And so I'm like, I'm going to read this book. And I'm reached out to Rachel to say, can we use your book? And she and I did Zooms and all that. And so I would read a chapter and then paint a symbol or an image from the chapter on the canvas. So the canvases are, 22 layers or elements that come together to create your unique Tara. So I launched that program like September 9th, 2020, right? So right, pandemic. I had like 9 of the 22 lessons done, and it was incredible. How in that first month there were like 900 people joined, and it was wow. Okay, so it's such an amazing example, kind of similar to what you're saying, as far as you get your marching orders, so to speak, when you open up, right? And so Tara's kind of a whole pantheon in and of herself, right? I mean, between her and her 21 aspects, she's everything. And before then, I'd painted yellow Tara Lakshmi, I'd painted Freya, I'd painted aspects of me, like divine feminine aspects of me that helped me understand who I was. Like I painted one that started out just very abstractly, and I remember thinking like, I'm not going to try and paint anything, and I was just kind of dragging paint across the canvas, and then I flipped it and I saw like this woman's figure and a shield, and she ended up kind of soaring over this teeny tiny town that was down in the bottom of the canvas, and she had an owl on her shoulder, which is why I now have this big owl tattoo on my shoulder, because I'd always say that in Athena. And when I looked at her, I was like, okay, this is the part of me that wants to focus way more and prioritize way more this higher perspective, where the little details, like I'm not a really good detail person. But so the little details fade away, right? And life on Earth as we know it, as 3D human matrons, whatever, becomes just this tiny pinprick compared to like what's available to us. And so that was like a self-declaration of like, I'm going to live from that place. I'm going to live from what is still important. When I raise my perspective, when I raise my vibration, what's important, and living from that place. And so she doesn't have a name per se, right? But I recognized her as an aspect of the divine feminine who was mirroring for me an aspect of me that was inside that I hadn't, been able to kind of describe or quantify or witness, because she was just in there. So I felt like getting to know and painting is how I get to know the divine feminine, is getting to know parts of me. And I felt like in meditation, there was one time I was distracted by this recurring thread of like how to help him understand, years after the divorce. And I heard the goddess again, just like thoughts, but she was just like, enough, stop thinking about the man. Like, he's got everything he needs. Do you know how long we've been waiting to have strong, independent, creative women on the ground, on earth, to move through? And whenever you're tempted to think about him, think about me. And it was like, yes, ma'am. Right? Like, and so, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do a lot with meditation as well. And there have been times that not so much now, because of so many of us, people are understanding the sacredness of a creative practice, and that it's not just about being good at painting or drawing and all that. But there was a time where I was kind of curious about, how can I not do the painting? Can I not have to hear, oh, I'm not creative, I can't even draw a straight line, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, no, what you're offering is a place and a practice where people can go and connect to their own inner wisdom, their own divine feminine. It's not about me. And I've never, like, it's always felt very much like everything's coming through me from the very beginning. And I opened an art center with no art training. So like right away, it was like, I have to let go and not count on myself and just follow the prompts, right? So it's always been about that. So just keep having this conversation and offering this creative practice and creating space for people to explore it, so that they can connect themselves to their own infinite creative being, however that wants to express, right? And I love it. I mean, it's like, wow, it's so fun. And it's changed over the years, right? Like 28 years ago, I was talking about right, left brain and comparing them to muscles, so as the frequencies change and evolve, as does the conversation, I think, we're all having, just like you leaving the gallery, right, to launch into this whole other aspect of yourself, which clearly for me now feels so much more potent and of service to the divine feminine than creating for the gallery audience. Nothing wrong with that, just different. And I'm glad you're here in this space.
Thank you.